The Mario Kart series is a pillar of gaming. Everyone has some experience playing a Mario Kart game, and no matter which version is being played, not you're bound to have a good time. But even if you've played every Mario Kart game on every Nintendo console, there are still some Mario Kart entries that you've probably never experienced. And that's because it requires the unthinkable: going outside. Mario Kart for arcade system. Now, chances are you've encountered one of these in your life, and yeah, you might have even played it. But being an arcade game, you probably haven't exactly experienced everything it has to offer, since every time you want to play, you gotta cough up some cash. You can't just sit there and play for hours and hours without going into severe credit card debt. But how did these games come to be? Well, let's travel back to the magical year of 2001. Nintendo was hyping up their brand new game console, the GameCube, a significantly more powerful console than their previous Nintendo 64, capable of full motion video, more complex models, and it actually used discs this time. And aside from consumers getting excited for a new Smash Bros. Game and Luigi's Mansion, the GameCube caught the eye of game developers as well, namely NAMCO and Sega. The two companies saw the GameCube hardware as an opportunity to lower costs for the creation of arcade cabinets. Despite their other game development efforts, both NAMCO and Sega kept up a steady flow of arcade cabinets throughout the 90s. So the two companies came together to propose the idea of working with Nintendo, and surprisingly, Nintendo agreed. The three-way partnership on this new arcade architecture was announced in 2002, appropriately named the Triforce Arcade Board, based on the symbol from the Zelda series representing the three companies. Sega would handle the manufacture of the physical arcade hardware and units. Namco took more of a lead on the software development side, and Nintendo mostly concerned themselves with the licensing of their properties and some quality control. Outside of that, they were still primarily focused on their home consoles and handhelds, so arcade development really wasn't on their mind. Games would begin trickling out using the Triforce board over the coming years. Virtua Striker 2002, F-Zero AX, but of course the biggest use of this system was Mario Kart. Racing games have been a staple for arcades, but since Mario Kart didn't even exist when arcades were at their peak popularity, it seemed like a no-brainer to merge the two ideas into one. Mario Kart Arcade GP was the result of that idea. Being a nearly 20-year-old arcade cabinet, you'd be hard-pressed to find this thing in the wild today. But through the power of... and with some minor tweaking, you can experience this game today. With the Triforce board being essentially a modified GameCube, a modified version of the Dolphin emulator exists that lets you play the various Triforce arcade games without having to shove the D to your house into your monitor. And in a similar vein, Arcade GP is itself a modified version of Mario Kart Double Dash, and while this isn't exactly noticeable on first glance, some models, sound effects, and graphics are very clearly ripped from that game. So you've got your run-of-the-mill Mario Kart characters here, your Marios and your Donkey Kongs, but because this game was developed by Namco, we get three special guests: Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man, and Blinky. Ha, losers didn't make it. I don't know if it's the Smash Bros effect, but there's just something about seeing Mario and Pac-Man next to each other that just makes sense. Even in this weird kart racing crossover, these two just don't look out of place together. After selecting your character on the actual arcade cabinet, you're prompted to take a photo of yourself, which you can then decorate with a few different cosmetics on top, and this picture is used in the game. But since we're doing... that isn't gonna work for us here. So instead, a render for the character we're playing as shows up instead. And then you can pick a game mode of either Versus, Grand Prix, or Time Trial. Versus mode is only available if there are other cabinets linked up to it, pitting up to 4 players against one another in races. Time Trial is obvious enough: race through courses and try to set the fastest time. And then Grand Prix, where a majority of the gameplay tends to happen. This is similar to your standard Mario Kart Grand Prix mode, with different tracks divided up amongst different cups. But this is way lamer. So you have 4 races, but rather than being on totally different tracks, it's basically the same track just slightly tweaked. It'll be something like one track has you turn this way, the next track has you turn this way, then the first track, but this one's at sunset, and the next one, but it's at night. This is just the same damn thing. All they did was move one of those Bob's Barricade things from the left to the right. That's how all of these Grand Prix are, and I get it, it's an arcade game, it's not meant to have the diversity of content because you don't play for as long, but they could have done a little more. There are 5 different Grand Prix Cups, with a 6th unlockable cup after you complete the others. Mario Cup has Mario Highway and Mario Beach, definitely inspired by Mario Sunshine. DK Cup has DK Jungle and Bananan Ruins, which is admittedly a pretty cool track. You can see some of DK's animal buddies running and flying around. It's a really cool one. Wario Cup has Diamond City and Snow Panic, with the latter just randomly becoming a snowy area before returning to the city. Pac-Man Cup is definitely the coolest of the bunch. The first track is Pac Mountain, a race through a mountain found in Pac-Land starting at a village. And then there's Pac Labyrinth, where the race teleports to a giant arena matching the style of the Pac-Man arcade game. Bowser Cup has the tracks Bowser's Castle and Castle Wall, which are just two different routes in a very generic Bowser Castle. And what's a Mario Kart game without Rainbow Road? The Rainbow Cup features Rainbow Coaster, their unique spin on Rainbow Road, and Rainbow Downhill, which transports you to a track going down a hill. Each cup is 4 races alternating between each form of the track, and you have to get first place in order to clear each race and move on to the next. If you get second or lower, no dice, you gotta cough up some more quarters and try again. Clearing the 4 races rewards you with an unlockable item, but wait, there's more! After the cup is cleared, you're offered a challenge. The challenges vary from cup to cup, collecting coins, hammering Koopas, pushing a giant watermelon. Successfully completing these challenges will give you a special item exclusive to the character that you're playing as. Now, despite the similarities to Double Dash, Arcade GP does control quite differently since it isn't designed around a controller. I would say half the time your cart is very easy to control, but turning is quite sensitive, so your cart can really get away from you if you aren't careful. The hardest part, I'd say, is mastering the sharp turns and drifting system that this game implements. Drifting involves tapping the brake and turning, but you don't have nearly as much control during this time as in other Mario Kart games. I found myself slamming against walls constantly. It's really a skill to master figuring out what angle to approach a sharp turn at. Drifting also doesn't offer you mini turbos like you'd expect. Instead, during your drift, you get a little shield bubble around you, offering you protection from incoming items. And let me tell you, this game has items. There are over 100 different items that can be used during races, ranging from Mario Kart Classics to brand new ones created just for this game. You start with a bare bones number of items, but like I said before, you can unlock items to use with anyone and unlock special items that are unique to certain characters. Now, while all of this is kinda cool, every item really just falls into one of 8 categories. Items that can lock on and seek out an opponent in front of you, items that are thrown forward without a lock-on, items that are thrown backward, items that can be thrown either forward or backward, items that stay on the track as a hazard, close-range melee attack items that change properties of enemy carts, and other. And while a bunch of these items are definitely creative, I feel like there's a ton of fat that can be trimmed with this item roster. Like there's the sticky oil, which makes an opponent's cart harder to control, and then there's the tack, which makes an opponent's cart harder to control. Like the game offers different explanations, but a lot of them just end up doing the same things anyway. Slow the cart down, make it tougher to steer, cover the screen up, just simply hit you. These are all staples to Mario Kart, sure, but really you don't need so many duplicates if they're all doing the same thing. And the weirdest part is that each track limits the number of items to 3. At some points you get to choose these items, but a lot of times they're just preset for you, which makes having a ton of items feel both overwhelming and completely useless at the same time. And that's really a shame because the whole gameplay loop for this game is clearing cups to unlock more items, but when they mostly do the same thing as items you probably already have, it just feels like a fool's errand. Now you might be wondering, with all of this unlockable stuff, how do you access it when you're done playing? Enter the Mario Card. There were 2 types of cabinets for Arcade GP, one that had a card dispenser and reader, and one without. For an additional fee, the cabinet could spit out a card that recorded your progress, and you could bring it back and scan it to keep everything you had unlocked and repeat the process. Kind of an innovative idea. When the Triforce board was being developed, the original thought was to utilize GameCube memory cards to save progress, with the added bonus of extra content that you could bring back home. But that didn't really go anywhere, so they came up with the Mario Kart instead. After completing the standard Grand Prix, you get the Special Grand Prix, which is all the same cups and tracks, but with way harder CPU racers, with the reward of unlocking upgraded items. After Special Grand Prix is 150cc mode, a faster version of the standard mode with triple items unlocked instead. And finally, Special 150cc mode, with more triple item unlocks and harder CPUs. Really, the only cool thing about any of these modes is that the first 2 races of each cup in special mode are played in reverse, as in you literally play these tracks backwards. It's pretty cool, and it's something that I always wish would show up in the home console versions of Mario Kart. Overall, Mario Kart Arcade GP does a decent job at being an arcade Mario Kart. It's definitely an experience worth playing a handful of times, but it's not anything you'd particularly play for hours on end, especially given the era this game released, when you could go home and play Double Dash in the comfort of your home with your nice cushy GameCube controller. Man, that controller is just peak design, isn't it? And that brings us to the sponsor of today's video, Nixie, and their brand new Switch controller, the Nixie Wizard. The GameCube controller is often considered one of the greatest controllers ever made, so much so that every Nintendo console since the GameCube has had the ability to use it in some way. Well, Nixie is taking that to the next level with their Wizard controller, using the same layout as the GameCube controller, but fusing it with all of the features of the Switch Joy-Cons, minus the drift. The Wizard uses the Hall sensor, meaning you'll never have to worry about drifting. You can even swap out the shell on the analog stick, giving you the choice between the hexagonal GameCube style or the more modern smooth analog style. You can even use it in handheld mode. Just slide it in your Switch like normal, and you're off running. But if standard TV mode is more your speed, this is also a great standard controller option as well. The buttons are nice and tactile, and you can really feel the build quality. There's even extra buttons on the back of the controller, able to be mapped to any button to increase your performance. So hit that link in the description and pick up a Wizard of your very own, available in the classic indigo, platinum, and black colors. Big thanks to Nixie for sponsoring today's video, and let's get back to Mario Kart. Just 2 years after the release of Arcade GP, a sequel was released, Mario Kart Arcade GP 2. But honestly, I think that 2 is pretty generous. This game basically boils down to being Arcade GP Plus, because it's literally just Arcade GP 1 with some additional content. Arcade GP 2 introduces 2 new characters, Waluigi, an obvious choice, and of all things, Mamechi the Tamagotchi. Between the release of Arcade GP 1 and 2, the 2 Japanese companies, Bandai and NAMCO, merged into a single company. You'll never guess the name. So with the 2 becoming 1, they had access to a wider selection of properties. Because Bandai was a toy manufacturer, a lot of these wouldn't have worked great for a Mario crossover. But Tamagotchis were a sort of toy video game hybrid, so Mamechi doesn't really feel all too out of place in this lineup. Like, he's clearly the odd man out, but kind of in an endearing way. Added into the mix of unlockables this time around are brand new karts, one for each new racer. These karts basically boil down to slightly tweaked stats, offering higher top speed at the cost of slightly slower acceleration. New items are also found in this version of the game. The Grand Prix Cups are now organized by difficulty, increasing the challenge the further down the line you go. On top of that, there are 2 new cups. Yoshi Cup becomes the first new cup, which is on par with the Pac-Man Cup in terms of creativity. The raceway takes on the art style of Yoshi's Island, that sort of colored pencil vibe. Yoshi Park 1 takes the race through the Castle of Cake, filled with all kinds of baked goods, while Yoshi Park 2 takes the ideas of Luigi's Mansion and combines it with the art style of Yoshi's Island. The only downside is that, being the easiest course, it's literally just basically a straight line, but it's still fun to look at. The other cup is the Waluigi Cup, featuring Stadium Arena and Waluigi Stadium. This is your basic dirt bike style stadium, but I guess Waluigi is a big dinosaur guy, because there are robotic dinosaurs everywhere in both forms of this track. This game also introduces color commentary, which fortunately you can mute before a race starts, because this guy does not stop talking.
Donkey Kong!
Chase down the top driver.
You can
He's
down
down
the
the
highway.
highway. Chance.
Boo!
Throw an item, collect coins, pass a racer, get passed by a racer, make a turn. Anything you do, this guy has got something to say. Literally nothing could be happening and he'll say, "It's a calm race, try playing more aggressively." Like, dude, I get it. It's a cute feature, but I wish it could be a little bit less frequent. Once again, Mario cards are compatible with this version of the game, so that sweet progress can be saved and replayed. All in all, this kinda just feels like DLC for the game. A couple new tracks and characters and some quality of life additions, but I wouldn't have called it a full sequel. If you're looking to play one of these 2 games on your own, I would skip 1 and just play 2, honestly. Picking 1 would kinda be like playing Mario Kart 8 over 8 Deluxe. Like, yeah, it's fine to play that one, but you're playing it knowing you're playing the same game just with less stuff in it. It would take a full 6 years for a true sequel to finally release for this series. 2013 saw the release of Mario Kart Arcade GP Deluxe, a huge leap from GPs 1 and 2. This time around, the cabinet didn't use the Triforce board, instead using more modern hardware for the era. Likewise, the actual engine seems to have been reworked a fair bit. It's likely they used Arcade GPs 1 and 2 as a reference, but the game doesn't seem to be a modified Double Dash anymore. Right away, you can tell the steering has really been worked on. While the previous entries were fairly decent to control, this game makes the experience even better. Steering isn't nearly as sensitive, so you won't feel like you're slip sliding all over the place. Drifting is much easier to control too. I don't crash into walls nearly as often. I mean, I still do it for the rush, but it's my choice this time, I promise. And drifting now actually offers mini turbo boosts. To make it more obvious to the player, a small gauge appears when you begin drifting. The longer you hold the drift, the more levels you gain for the boost, up to a maximum of 3 levels, and then you straighten out the wheel for the boost to take effect. It just didn't feel like Mario Kart without having mini turbo, so I'm really glad these are here. Gliding and underwater sections are here too, brought over from Mario Kart 7, and courses are adjusted to include these mechanics. But perhaps the biggest feature of this new upgrade is the implementation of downloadable content. These new machines have internet access, and over the years, GP Deluxe has received many updates. New characters, courses, vehicles, items, these were all gradually patched in. There was even a total overhaul of the HUD in one update. My understanding is that most of these updates were released only for Japanese cabinets. Internationally, we got a handful of updates, but the most recent ones have only been for those in Japan, which is why the version of the game I'm playing is in Japanese. In fact, as I was in the middle of making this video, an update for the cabinet was announced by Bandai Namco for summer 2023. It seems to be a bit more of a quality of life update than anything else, but the fact that it's getting updates at all after 10 years is mind-blowing. There are currently 20 total characters in the roster for the game, with many returning and many new. Pac-Man gets his disturbing redesign from Pac-Man and the Ghostly Adventures, and most of the other characters use updated models from then recent Nintendo games. But the absolute highlight of this roster is yet another weird Namco inclusion. Don-chan, the main character of the Taiko no Tatsujin series. Like Pac-Man, these games debuted in arcades before seeing home console releases, and somehow racing as a magical living drum still doesn't feel out of place in the Mario series. On top of this, multiple characters in the game have skins. These generally just serve as the same character, but with the ability of using a different special item depending on the skin you use. For the most part, these are just basic recolors, like Fire Mario or a different colored Yoshi, but the coolest is definitely Bowser's Dry Bowser skin. The number of carts and items has also been drastically increased as well. But the problem still exists where the items really just feel like a bunch of reskins of the same handful of ideas. Depending on the settings for the cabinet, you can now pick your items for each race rather than the track having a preset selection. But a lot of the cabinets just end up being in quick play mode, where you'll end up with a randomly selected item for forward, backwards, and status, which really just highlights all the more how similar pretty much all of these items are. As far as the actual tracks in the game, it's kind of a mixed bag. Here are all of the cups found in GP Deluxe, and here are the ones that offer actual new content. Only 2 cups. The all-new Donkey Kong Cup follows the same theme as the tracks found in GP 1 and 2, but it has a different course layout. The Pac-Man Cup is also entirely new, with Pac-Man Stadium and NAMCO Circuit. Like the last games, the 2 tracks found in the cup are really just one track with alterations. Pac-Man Stadium is rather straightforward, a Pac-Man themed stadium. NAMCO Circuit, though, is a really cool variant of the track, filled with a bunch of different Namco game references outside of just Pac-Man, like Dig Dug or Galaga. There are quite a few cups that, on first glance, appear to feature all new courses. And while that's kinda true, the actual track layouts all first appeared in previous games. They were just given new themes. The new Toad Cup is actually a rebranded Yoshi Cup from GP2. The Don-chan Cup is the old DK Cup, and the Bowser Jr. Cup is a reworked Waluigi Cup. When you're playing all the games back to back, this does seem kinda lame, but when you actually play the games in the context they were designed for, short bursts in an arcade, you wouldn't even really notice it. Ideally, they would have given us some totally new track layouts, but I think redesigning old courses is totally valid. The Toad Cup features the courses Peach Castle and Kingdom Way. These are fairly generic Mario-themed tracks, with one taking you through Peach's Castle and the other through the Mushroom Kingdom. The Don-chan Cup is probably my favorite, with the tracks Bon Dance Street and Omatsuri Circuit. Bon Dance Street places the race in the middle of a big festival, which has a really nice atmosphere. Omatsuri Circuit takes place in the same location, but at daytime, and it veers off into a Japanese temple. The new Donkey Kong Cup really just uses the same environments as its previous incarnation. Bananan Labyrinth takes you through some ruins, while DK Jungle keeps you in the jungle. This cup was added in an update, and since they already used the track layouts for the Don-chan Cup, it makes sense that they would take the assets they already had and make all new track layouts. The Bowser Jr. Cup features Aerial Road and Sky Arena. The tracks for both of these are found on top of the airships from the Mario series, series, with racers using glide ramps and boost panels to jump from airship to airship. While the layout is reused from the last games, the way this one pieces together a track up in the sky through multiple airships is really sick, especially considering the original track was just a generic stadium. On first glance, you wouldn't even be able to tell that these two were the same tracks. Oh, and the Mario Cup and Bowser Cup are also here, but outside of the graphical improvements, these are exactly the same. There are also some new modes in this game. Team Battle, which puts players on teams and works just like it does in the console games. Co-op mode, where 2 players team up to race against 2 other CPU teams. Races happen like normal, but there are special items for the human players. The Friendship Shield, which protects you from your teammates' items for a short time, and the Fusion Cart, which fuses the 2 players into basically a giant tank, turning it into Double Dash's co-op mode, with 1 player driving and 1 controlling the items, which are an unlimited number of green shells. Then there's Green Shell All You Can Throw, a mode that literally gives every player unlimited green shells. And finally, National Battle, a mode exclusively for Japanese cabinets. This will have you race against players around the various regions of Japan. The long-term goal is to complete each region and earn points. Based on the player's performance, special content is unlocked. And I know I just spent a bunch of time criticizing this game, but once I actually start playing it, I just have a blast. The actual driving feels good, the tracks are all fun to race on, and I totally forget about the item redundancy once I actually start playing the game. And the game also just looks fantastic. Everything is so vibrant, and the diversity of environments across the tracks just makes every cup feel unique. This game honestly competes with Mario Kart 8 in appearance, which is really saying something because this is barely rendering in 720p. For this entry of the game, the Mario Kart has been officially retired, and NAMCO instead implemented a universal card that works for all of their arcade games, the Banana Passport card. As you race, you'll collect Mario coins scattered through the tracks, with bonuses given depending on certain criteria. Every 50 coins, the Yoshi robot machine will activate a spin that selects a randomly colored Yoshi egg, and inside that egg is an unlockable item, card, or character. The rarer the egg, the better the prize. As far as I understand, this is pretty much Japanese exclusive. The cabinets found in the West mostly seem to be in quick play mode, with the preset selection of racers, carts, and items available. I guess they didn't want to give us the Banana Passport over here, which makes sense. I mean, we would immediately call out that that does not look like a banana. And the final game in the Arcade GP series, honestly, even calling it a game is pretty generous. In recent years, Bandai Namco has made a big push with VR arcade games, and Mario Kart was not exempt from this. 2017 saw the release of Mario Kart Arcade GP VR. But really, this feels more like a tech demo than an actual arcade game. There's only 1 course split into 3 sections based on previous arcade tracks. There are only 4 characters plus 2 CPU racers and only 3 items total. Everything done by the player has to be physically done, so the action of throwing a shell involves literally doing a throwing motion. I've personally never played it, but it looks like something I'd try just the one time to say that I played it, rather than something I'd keep going back to over and over. There isn't really a lot to say about this game, but since it's technically in the Arcade GP series, I figured I'd briefly talk about it. And that is the entirety of the Mario Kart Arcade GP series. Everything about this little subsection of the Mario Kart series feels like one of those things that you eventually forget about, then you see the cabinet out in the wild and you go, oh yeah, that exists. None of these games are bad, and it's definitely worth giving a try if you ever do stumble across one, but it's not something that I'd recommend playing for hours and hours. Seriously.